Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel. So today I wanted to hit a different Science Olympiad event, which is Road Scholar. And I did Road Scholar all throughout middle school, and I was able to win awards at the invitational, regional, as well as the state level. Yeah, and so today I wanted to specifically talk about contour lines, which is a topic in like topography. Um, and it's one of the most basic topics that you're going to encounter. I'll probably do an entire series on Road Scholar and the various things you need to know for Road Scholar, and hopefully, you guys can use this for the upcoming season as well as more seasons to come. And so, starting off really simple, what are contour lines? And basically, what contour lines are, when you see a topographic map, you're going to see these lines just kind of running throughout the map. And they might not always be like horizontal. Typically, you'll see them in like some sort of curve type of shape. That's a really bad drawing. They're never going to overlap each other. And so you would probably see them something like this. Yeah. And so they're always going to complete like a full circle. And what they do is that they represent 3D terrain on 2D maps. Because obviously, when you're looking at a map, you can't really tell the elevation of the landform that you're looking at. So these contour lines help you do that. And so, like it says, it helps you visualize hills, valleys, and slopes. And so if you take a look at the image below, the quality is really bad, but I think you can get pretty much an idea of what it's trying to refer to. And so if we just look at this like top part right here, right? We see that when we have these lines that are kind of spaced out apart, we have a small little hill. But on the contrary, when we have these lines that are quite tight knit together, we have a deep or a steep hill. And so I'll talk more about that in the further sides, but that's something you kind of want to remember. So, some key terms. The first key term you're going to hear a lot is contour interval, and this is the difference between two contour lines. And so often you'll get a question being like, "Hey, what is the contour interval of this map?" And in further videos, I'll teach you how to look at a map and figure out the contour interval. But really, it's most of the time just going to be labeled at the bottom of the map. But otherwise, for example, if you have a line here and you have a line here, right? And you know this line is at interval 20, and this one is, at elevation 20, and this one's at elevation 40. And so the contour interval really just is 20, right? In whatever units they're using. Next, we have the index contour. And so what you're typically going to see is you're going to see like a bold line, which is going to be labeled. So it could be like, let's say like 100, right? And then you're going to see thinner lines underneath that. And then you're going to see a thick line again, and let's say it's 0. So I want you guys to figure out right now, what is the contour interval of these lines which I just showed you. So hopefully you counted up the lines. You should have figured out that there's 1, 2, 3, 4 lines in between, which means if we divide 100 by 5, we get 20. And that should be our contour interval. Because if we go 20, 40, 60, 80, and then 100. And so the contour interval would be 20 in this case. Next, we have depression contours. These are hatcher marks that point inward. Um, I'll show you in further size, you'll see images of these, so I'll point them out. And then benchmarks are basically just going to be like, if we have a hill, you're going to see these lines that go around and around, right? And let's say this line says 600, and so the contour interval is every 20, right? All you know is that this hill has an elevation, let's say that's the top of the hill. you know that this hill has an elevation that's from 601 to 619. Because if it reached 620, we would see another contour line drawn there. And so, um, if the person who created the map wants to give you the exact elevation point, what they're going to do is they're going to draw an X, and they're going to say, oh, it's like 617 or something. And so that would be a benchmark. All right, next up we have how to read the contour lines. And so I talked about this a little bit earlier, but essentially what you want to know is you basically want to memorize this like kind of thing. And so whenever you see these close lines, like you would see over here, that means you have some sort of a steep slope. When you see some of the wider space lines, you're going to have a gentle slope. When you see, loops like that, like we see over here, these are some sort of a hill or some sort of a mountain. And then if we see loops with hatcher marks, that represents some sort of a depression. All right. So just some quick elevation practice. Feel free to pause the video here and try to figure out these questions. And so what I'm asking is, what is the contour interval? What is the elevation at point C? And then is the elevation of point D higher or lower than point C? So pause the video and try to answer this on your own. So hopefully you paused the video and you should have gotten that the contour interval is 50. And we can tell this by saying, hey, the first line has an interval of 0, the next one has an interval of 50, and the second line has an interval of 100. And so if we look at the difference, we see it's always getting incremented by 50. The elevation of point C, you should have also gotten as 50, because if we see point C is on this line, which traces all the way around to that marking right there. And you should have gotten point D to be higher than point C, because point D is on the line of 200, which is higher than 50. And I wanted to point out, you can actually see a benchmark right here. So that benchmark is telling you that the top of that mountain is at 325. Because they have, from if there wasn't a benchmark, that top is either from 301 to 349, because the contour interval is 50, and if it was 350 they would have drawn another line. And so for the person who created the map to tell you what the actual elevation of that hill is, they have to create some sort of a benchmark, and in this case they told you it's 325 by doing a triangle and a dot. All right. So next, a couple of rules that you should always remember. First of all, lines never cross. There have been some instances during tests where I've been asked to draw some sort of contour lines, but we'll go over that in later videos. Additionally, like I was talking about earlier, lines always form loops. Water flows perpendicular to contours and always flows downhill, meaning that V's point upstream in valleys. And so when you know that there's a river and you see the contour lines will form some sort of a V around it. And the V is always going to point upstream. And so I can see in this photo, the V's are pointing upstream because the river is going that way. And so you'll get a couple questions being like, hey, what direction is the river pointing? And maybe you'll get a north, south type of compass. And you'll just say, well, the river is flowing downstream, the river is flowing south because, that's where the downstream is. All right. So some 3D visualization. This has never really happened on a test. There's never been a question on this. But it kind of helps to understand why, when we have far apart lines, we have, not that steep of a slope, versus when we have really close lines, we have a steep slope. And so if you just try to imagine the lines off the page, it can help with that. But really, if you get the deep concept down that, when they're further spaced, the slope isn't that steep, and when they're closer together, the slope is probably extremely steep. All right, so a couple of contour challenges. This image is quite blurry, so I'll help you guys out with this one. So the first question asks you to estimate the elevation at point A. And point A is over here, and we can see that point A is between 120 and 100. And so in this case, when they ask you to estimate the elevation, we can kind of see that it's around halfway through, but really they're going to give you points for any answer that lands between 101 and 119. Okay? And so we're just going to say 110 because it seems somewhat in the middle of the two lines. Next, we have to estimate the elevation of point B. And so point B is right here. It's between lines 80 and 60. And so once again, any answer between 61 and 79 works and should be marked correctly. But since it's more or less in the middle of the two lines, we can say it's around 70. And then lastly, what is the contour interval? And you should get this contour interval to be 20. And let me do a different color for that. You should get the contour interval to be 20 because we see, like, if we take 80 minus 60, we get a difference of 20 there. So some of you might be looking at this bottom part over here, this part, and wondering what it is because you might have seen it on one of the tests. And so that is what we call a profile. And in a profile, what you have to do is you basically have to plot these contour lines in a in an X and Y type of graph. And I'll go more into depth on it later, but essentially you're just going to go point by point. You're going to be like, okay, so point A is at 110. And so we can put point A somewhere over here. Point B is at 70. So this is 180, 60, 70. Point C, it's below 20. So we'll put it right there. Point D is also under 20. So we'll put it down there. And then point E is 20, 40, 60, right above 60. And so then what you would do is you would draw a line and try to show the profile of the land. And so it's essentially, if you took this map and looked at it from a side perspective, what is the shape of the land that you would see? Yeah. So a quick summary and a couple of tips. We started off by defining contour lines and learning that they show the elevation and the land shape of the land. We learned that closer lines equal steeper slopes, while further spaced out lines mean that the slope isn't that steep. We always want to look for the V's because the V's point upstream. We want to make sure we know that the loops of these lines are always going to close, and that if we look for index contours, they're always going to be bolded and they're always going to be labeled. And then lastly, a quick tip is it's always helpful to find the contour interval first. I believe most tests just have you find the contour interval as part of the question, because it really helps when you're trying to find, the elevation of some random object like a school or something, knowing that, hey, maybe the contour interval is 20. So if there's a line, we know that the elevation between the two lines is a difference of 20. Yeah, so that's about it for this video. It was a quick introduction to contour lines, intervals, and etc. And next video, we're going to look more into the profile, which I talked about earlier, as well as looking at maps and trying to figure out, hey, when I look at a map, where can I go to find the contour interval and other things that could be helpful for the test. I really hope you guys enjoyed this video. Please make sure to like, subscribe, and comment with any questions that you guys have. And I will see you guys next time. Thank you.